Hey, hello again. This is Mark Bakker. This new video on the power of PowerShell. Today I want to show you something about. Um, I want to learn something to you. I want to teach you something about modularity, if I can pronounce it correctly. I hope you get what I mean. Um, yeah, what I mean by modular means that make sure your script doesn't have like too many nested loops, like a for each loop that has another for each loop that has another for each loop. And there are if statements inside of that. And even sometimes in those if statements are even again for each loops. I've been programming for a long time, and I can tell you that you will get stuck with that approach in any programming language. It doesn't matter which one. And that's because you need to uh, think more in like smaller pieces, right? It's not really object-oriented programming, but still look in smaller pieces. Always try to cut it up. And I've got a very nice example. There's a very large telecom provider uh, that was busy on a very large scale on VMware, and they needed to have dynamic resource pools basically because the whole day systems were deployed and systems were decommissioned. So those resource pools in VMware they needed to um, yeah, be dynamically, sort of speak. So the guy that was there responsible for the PowerShell did a great job, but he at some point he got stuck. So so they called me. I talked a little bit with the manager, and after a couple of days, I assisted them, and I started investigating where the guy was stuck because hadn't seen anything of the code yet. So I investigated his code, and I'm not trying to be mean or something, and that's certainly not the case for me. But at some point, I found like I need to scroll to the correct example. Hang on. Yeah. So this was the script. So when I sat down with the guy, he was already on the right track, sort of speak, but he could stuck here. He was doing a for each cluster. He was looping clusters, and then he did some stuff with the clusters. He gets the hosts, and then he gets the first name of the host, and then he did some factoring on the type of CPU, and then we did some calculations, and then he gets the resource pool, and then he gets the second resource pool because that's the resource pool that was for like the high availability. So that was on the other side that needs to be taken in consideration as well for the sizing part. And then he had another for each loop, and he was doing some filtering there, and basically already got stuck here. It didn't work perfectly, but he still continued with that one, and then he needed to have some recursion as well. So herein is this an if statement inside of this second for each loop, and there he calls another for each loop. And inside of that, he does an if statement, and he calls another for each loop. And there's an if statement inside of that, and another for each loop. Basically, when you see this behavior, this if for each, if for each, if for each, you need to use recursion, right? So basically, you need to call yourself a couple of times until you're done, so to speak. You can do that with folders. So basically, this guy was yeah, he was really stuck. So after seeing this code, I offered to help them, of course, and I restructured the whole code. And to be fair, this wasn't the script that I created in like a couple of days. It took me a lot of time as well because I needed to sit with the architect as well because that guy made up that whole solution, right, on how the calculation should take place and what were the values and such. But basically, I ported the script with like all these for each loops, and he got stuck because the script wasn't done here. At this point, he was stuck and he called his manager, "Please, I need help. I just cannot continue this myself." And nobody else could at that company, obviously. So they hired me. And I basically rewrote that whole script, and it's a very large script. And I just wanted to show you about the modularity about this code, right? So it's a very large script, but this is like the main loop, right? You have a for each. We looked through all the fee centers that were a lot there. It was like 20, 30 vCenters perhaps. I don't know. There was really a lot. Then we connected to that vCenter, and for each vCenter we got the cluster, and for each cluster we had like a main sort of a function wrapper, right? So not all those for each statements, and that function then get called, right? This function, and that does the main calculations and such, pretty large function. And based on that, in the end, it passes it to a couple of sub functions that are inside of this code. But where it where the magic comes is it's modular. So you do something with the pool, so you have a function for that. You do something with the cluster, you have a function for that. You do something initially, you have a function for that. And those ones you can then separately call. And the script looks a lot more complicated than it is because there are some insane calculations going on here, based on all kinds of values to configure the correct size. You could even help from VMware there to make those calculations and make it sizable. Um, but yeah, this is very complicated script, but it's very modular. You see, it's all functions here. There's again a function. So it's not one big for each where you at some point you just get stuck. You do it modular, and then even you can call a function can call itself over and over again. It's no need like a for each and a for each and a for each. No, just one for each that calls himself again, for instance. And most of the magic is happening here, right? So we have a lot of input, right? VI servers, there was a couple here. Those are some limits. So where the script is based upon. So basically, if you change a value here, then the script behaves differently. And basically, this is what I wanted to show you. So to get from this, like where you get at some point you get stuck with the for each and the for each and the if for each, if for each, if for each, and here he got stuck. Here he needed recursion because this guy needed to call himself again and again. So basically he needed to continue for each if endlessly because he didn't know when it ended. That's basically what I fixed. So the key takeaway is not to understand the code I wrote, but to make it modular and detect when you need to write functions. You need to detect when you need to cut it up. This is already a lot, and then here comes another if and another for each and another one and another one. And then basically, if you see this pattern, you just know you're stuck in your code. Your approach is wrong. Um, yeah. Um, so I think that was it for now. Yeah. So thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something from this. See you in the next video, I hope. Bye.